Hello, my name is Eric Atkins. Today I'm here to give you a better sense of why YouTube is a great form for enhancing education. In particular, I've got a real interest in showing how these how-to videos that keep popping up are making learning new things much easier. To give you an example that could include things like oil changes or repairing parts on your computer, it seems like there's just new videos popping up every second. So today I'd like to focus a little bit more on a particular design, which is a home media server. It seems, somewhat relevant for this course and a great way to really illustrate my point about how these how-to videos that are popping up on YouTube make a new way for education, a new means to education, enhancing it. To give you a little bit more options for background, there should be a link for the motivation. It's a great little couple-minute video if you want to check it out. Otherwise, let's move on. Okay, so again, the presentation I have constructed is a how-to video that is going to demonstrate the significance of using technology to aid instruction and education. These techniques could be used for formal education. I have chosen to restrict it to the more how-to, particularly the home media server. As opposed to something we handle often, such as formal education, I thought this was a bit more relevant for the kind of personal life. The utility of having a home media server is twofold. First, the convenience of having all your media on your own, effectively a cloud, is perhaps unmeasurable. Second, the server can act as a source of backup for your computer. I'll begin to address the basics of how to make the home media server, but first I'd like to point out that I'm using the Screencast-O-Matic in order to demonstrate the power of the how-to. This is going to record everything you see on my screen, including the mouse that's moving around. It's very easy to just kind of say, hey, go over here, click this guy, go over there, click this guy. So kind of a preferred one. And it's free for the first 15 minutes. You can purchase for unlimited value. You can go pro, and that's got all sorts of benefits, but you can look into that on your own. Okay, so the main site we're going to use is the Lifehacker. In particular, it's a article titled "Turn an Old Computer into a Network Backed Up Streaming or Torrenting Machine with Ubuntu." Ubuntu is a Linux-based operating system. It's completely free. There are a ton of versions you can download. I would recommend the one that doesn't require you to delete your Windows interface. It works in conjunction with. So it's not like a 100% commitment. It allows you to kind of try it out, and it is going to be essential to operating the server element of your machine. Alright, so let's move on now to a little bit more about what you're going to need. Obviously this article, very important. You can't get to it, just a simple Google it. Alright, so this gives you a little background about why I want to give you some more now about what you'll need now. So take special note that there are minimum system configurations. Okay, they recommend the 512 megabytes of RAM and a 700 megahertz processor, or the 1.6 gigahertz. Very important, 1.6 gigahertz if you want to stream videos. They're not kidding around. That kind of is a very intense process that requires a pretty modern processor. I recommend at least the Intel Pentium, but the Intel Core 2 Duo would be best because it begins to have more graphics capabilities. I am going to give the video regarding to a DC5700 HP. This is kind of my choice because it was cheap, it's easy to find, they're in businesses all over, campus has a ton of them lying around, and I think it's relevant enough that it'll be helpful. And in general, a PC they're all kind of laid out the same, so the visual aid I think will help whatever the particulars are. You can look into more detail, perhaps even another YouTube video on it. Okay, so the idea is really simple, but some important points are that when you make the decision, be aware there exist many options to accommodate your server hardware. You can get really cheap and maybe upgrade some parts, such as I did. I upgraded the RAM and the PCU, or the central processing unit. But You might find you've got something laying around with the Intel Core 2 Duo already in it, and you don't need an upgrade to the processor, or more modern with the i7s, and you could do streaming of high definition. So just kind of keep in mind about what you're trying to accomplish. Most DVDs are at the 480p level. If you have high definition or Blu-ray, that's going to be 1080p. For the 480p, the Intel Core 2 Duo will be fine, but for more processing power, maybe consider the i7 and stuff. The other thing, I'm kind of assuming you have a digital library. If you don't, go ahead and realize that you're going to need to somehow take your DVDs and what's called rip them into digital format to store them onto the server. And there's a ton of links and videos for that to help you make a digital library. Okay, so the other thing now, we've talked about kind of the processor and the RAM, the minimum RAM configurations. We next have the hard drive that we're storing it on. You can store it in what's called a RAID configuration, which effectively makes it kind of a redundancy. So if one hard drive fails, you can back it up from the other hard drive. I recommend doing this eventually, but for most hard drives, they're good for about 1 million read writes and should not fail. They've gotten pretty good at not failing and repairing themselves. So if you go buy a modern hard drive of about 2 terabytes, that should get you started on this project, and then you can kind of play around with upgrades from there. He will recommend having some more of a RAID configuration on the article. It's totally up to you, just kind of how much you're willing to put up capital-wise up front. Okay, so let's recap. Choose an old computer and decide what you need to do the upgrade and the machine which will match your demand for Blu-ray versus DVD quality payment. And then, of course, music, etc. You can do pretty much anything you want that's digital media. Okay, so I would like now to move on to provide more visual aid to gain some basic understanding of what this hardware is going to look like. Again, it varies by computer, but for the most part, you're going to be looking at the same stuff. Maybe just, this piece is to the right instead of to the left in my machine. So I assure you upgrades are well within your means of capability. You can follow directions and watch tons of YouTube videos. Everybody has replaced every computer part there is in there, and I'm certain you can find out how to do yours. Now, I can't predict all your problems you're going to encounter, but that's the beauty of Google. There are a large part of my argument as to why YouTube is a solution to our educational needs. If you can't find something in your particular video, you can go find something else, an article or a forum, something that helps guide you to research and then narrows down what the exact question is, and then eventually gives you a solution or an ability to deduce your own solution from what you've learned. So recall I'm demonstrating this build of a home media server to illustrate my point. If you can learn even a small amount of new information that aids you in your educational pursuits, I would call that a success, since really it's free. I mean, I don't know that there's a better source of education, as long as I guess you have to pay the cost of a computer and internet access. But even the public libraries have internet-capable computers now, so if you can watch these things, there is tons of free opportunities to learn. Alright, so I'm going to move on. You'll now, instead of this screen that you're seeing here, again, you're going to want to kind of follow this pretty thoroughly. I'm not going to walk you through it all because we're trying to keep the video somewhat short. Follow this thoroughly to build the system, and I'm going to make another video to kind of give you an idea of the hardware that you're going to come into counter with and might need to upgrade. And then get back to summarizing. Thanks so much.
Hello again. I'm here now to show you some of the hardware options. Okay, so this is an image of the HP I was telling you about. Again, the DC5700. It comes stock with the Celeron D chip. This is not a chip we are interested in. It just doesn't have the power. So we upgraded the processor chip. To give you an idea of what this part's going to look like, I'll show you where it's at in the case, but for right now, it's easy to see the chip. It's going to come in a case like so. And the chip itself is not too big, about an inch or so. And this is the Central Processing Unit. This is the main brain. Nothing intimidating about it. Pretty simple to install and replace. Easy to follow instructions, I imagine. And the other piece, the RAM, the random access memory. This is also important for the thinking power of the computer. But again, just simple pull stuff out, put stuff in. Not too difficult at all to follow, I imagine. Alright, so first step we got to do is get this cover off. There's going to be various directions from the manufacturers on how to pull the covers off. Sometimes there's a screw, like in this case. Pulling off the screw. Once I've got the screw off. Okay, so you press down and slide the case back. And then it just lifts off nice and easily. Alright, now that we're looking in here, what you can see is this is the optical drive. This holds for the DVDs, etc. that you can place in. The hard drives are underneath it. We'll get to those in a moment. Back here we have the power supply. A ton of cords leading from the power supply. That's always a good sign that they're there. It gives electricity and data from a variety of sources. The electricity going to the board, for example. This red cable here is what's called the SATA connector. That's a form of cable for transferring the data. That's to be the one that'll go to the hard drive. Back over here, as you can see, kind of connects down there. Then what you're looking at, a lot of people see usually, is this green piece down here. The green, everywhere you see the green, that's the motherboard itself. That's attached by various screws. You can see a couple of them here, and there's maybe 10 or 12 of them around the board. The main point of that is just to keep it secure in its case. Obviously, you can always buy a new case and upgrade these things. Another important factor that will help your process is, in addition to knowing the motherboard, you're going to want to know this guy here. This is called the chipset. The chipset varies from motherboard to motherboard and highly determines what kind of CPU you can place in the motherboard. Again, lots of this is available on Google. Here you can see a heat sink. This is helping dissipate the heat as a lot of electricity runs through here. Heat needs to be dissipated, and various things you see along here. These larger kind of cylinder looking devices are capacitors to help store the electricity and increase the flow throughout the board so it gets everywhere it needs to be. These are empty right now. If you had a graphics card, they would go into one of these slots. This is a PCI slots. This is a PCI Express. This is a PCI. I don't need those. Again, I chose a processor that can handle my streaming videos. That was the Intel Pentium, or if you need to do Blu-ray, the Intel 2 Duo Core. Back here, kind of logistics, things that you may or may not need. A lot of the stuff that you're plugging into the back of your computer, your USBs, your video outputs, sound outputs, not too important for what we're doing here. Okay, so backing up here, again, optical drive over here, power source over here, graphics cards if you need them. The chipset is going to tell you what kind of compatibility this motherboard has to upgrade the CPU. Alright, let's move on now to another important factor. This is just a cover that helps direct the air to the central processing unit. The fan is here on the front, draws the air in and uses this plastic cover to guide the airflow. This is important mainly because you need to cool off that central processing unit. Some of the advanced gamers will have like liquid cooling options. This is just fan cooled. Alright, so I'm going to pull these cables out of the way so I can move the fan, expose what's called the heat sink. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the heat sink. This heat sink is very much like a radiator for your car. In fact, it kind of looks like it when you're looking up close. The heat sink's job is to take the heat from the central processing unit and cool it by increasing the surface area. And in some cases, they'll have liquid cooling that comes through here, so the water helps cool it instead of just air cooling. But not really necessary. It is, however, probably going to be important to have a heatsink, as running video for streaming video is going to put a lot of pressure onto that processor. So keeping it cool will help keep your electric bill down and kind of help operate. You can't see the central processing unit, but you can see the edge of where it's held into the board here. This is what clips in the central processing unit. Again, that's this square device is underneath this guy here, like about so, kind of at an angle though in this one. It's not too difficult. You can watch some probably other videos to figure out how to take it off or put it on. A lot of these things, again, are just held down by screws. You can do flathead or Phillips. It even's got the star point, I think, on there that you can use. So just kind of whatever tools you have. You can see a couple more of the screws holding the motherboard down there. Alright, so assuming that you can figure out how to change the central processing unit from what I've given you here, I'd like to now point out the RAM, which is kind of difficult to see. The RAM here are these 4 pieces. Zoom back out a little. 1, 2, 3, 4. I definitely recommend you do at least, you always pair. So if you're going to do 2, and you want whatever your configuration is going to be, just make it an even number so that you always have 2s, 4s, pairs of these RAMs, and then they come in 512 or 1 gigabytes, or even on the modern stuff 2 and 4 gigabyte configurations. You shouldn't need any more. I got 4 gigabytes. These are each 1 gigabyte a piece, and that does more than enough work for me on the central processing unit. Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to take out the optical drive. Not every box, this is the case, not every case is going to have this configuration for how to get your optical drives, including the hard drives, in and out. Some will have screws that you'll have to unscrew, others will just slide out though, just like this one. So you press down this button and simply lift. You'll press down and then just simply lift back, and then you can slide it up and it slides out. Here on the back you can see this is some for the data, and the power then goes right here. This is kind of common for all of them. They all get the same or similar connection for the power. You can just undo that power. It'll kind of tight, cramped quarters here. It'll give you some more working space. And set that drive off to the side. Alright, so now what we're looking at here are the hard drives. You can see I've got the Seagate Barracuda, 2 terabytes. They list it in gigabytes though. Don't know why. Doesn't really matter. You can choose again your hard drive just kind of based on your needs. Some simple Google searches should help you figure that out. Again, there's another hard drive under this. I'm not going to pull it out as well, just kind of save time here. You would just push this down, slide it back, and it lifts up nice and easily because the screws slide into these 4 corner slots that are around the case. You can kind of see the side of this one here. It slides in and then push it back a little and it locks it into place. The connections, again, you've got a power connection, that's this guy, and the data connection. This is the SATA. Alright, and I think that should pretty much give you enough information to replace everything that I've recommended and give you a good starting point for getting that hardware going. And if you follow that Lifehacker site very closely, it's going to pretty much guide you through everything else you're going to need to set up that home media server. Alright, I hope you got the point that these how-to videos are exceptionally helpful and are a transformation of what we consider education, and makes it kind of a new domain that we might not have expected previously. So thanks for watching, and I hope you got something out of it.